Hello and welcome to PCM's Webinar Thursday. We are thrilled to have you with us today for our live webinar on achieving hyper-availability with Veeam and VMware. Joining us today is Gina Marquez, Bill Roth, and Eric Collette. We're going to get right into our presentation in just a few minutes, but first I have a few housekeeping items. Please enter your questions in the question box on the right-hand side and I'll relay those to our speaker at the end of the presentation. We do send out a survey at the end of the webinar. Please fill it out and let us know how we did as well as topics you'd like to see covered on future webinars. You should see that survey in your inbox later today. Speaking of future webinars, please be sure to check out our weekly webinar schedule on our website at www.pcm.com/webinars/archive. We are recording this webinar. It will be available for playback in a few days. Recordings are posted to our webinars page along with our upcoming webinar schedule. There you can also find previous webinar recordings. We're going to get started with our presentation today, and here's what our agenda is looking like. We're going to kick it off with a quick overview to Veeam's value to VMware, also their partnership, evolution, and strategic priorities. Then the presenters will get into optimizing your environment with VMware, followed by ensuring hyper-availability for your enterprise with Veeam, followed by a summary and a Q&A session. So now I'd like to hand it over to Gina, and you can take it away.
Great, thank you, George. So I wanted to provide an overview with Veeam. We are focused on availability for the always-on enterprise, matching any data, any app on any cloud. And looking at the overall relationship that we have with VMware, 75% of our customers are utilizing VMware and are finding that simplifying IT operations and providing a single pane of glass is crucial for their environment. Veeam is viewed as a driver for virtualization for VMware for a number of years. 72% of our customer base is matched with the IDC survey that we've had, is focused on virtualization, and more than 78% of those customers are more than 75% virtualized. So what this means is that we are tying our strategic initiatives with VMware strategic initiatives. Move to the next slide. So overall, we've seen a significant improvement in SLAs, 2x from RTO perspective, and about 10x in RPO. And what this is really implying is customers and partners are seeing Veeam and VMware, and our strategic initiatives are moving along and improving RTO time and RPO time. Next slide. So overall, our strategic partnership, we are focused across modernized data center and integrated public cloud. And within those subsets of those initiatives with Veeam and VMware, vSphere is really a focus. So about 83% of Veeam's revenue is associated with VMware globally. About 75% of our customers are utilizing VMware and have seen significant benefits in simplifying IT operations from recovery standpoint. We have integration with vSAN, and we're one of the first to have the certification, the VMware Ready vSAN solution. We also have integrations with the cloud, so VMC on AWS, and then lastly, building out solutions with VMware for vCloud Director, vRealize Automation, Operations, Login Site, and vSphere Site Client Plugin. Okay, next slide. And with that, I'll turn this over to George.
Actually, I'll take it. So this is Eric. I am a partner solutions engineer supporting VMware. or actually a VMware Partner Solutions engineer supporting PCM. And I'm going to talk a little bit about optimizing your environment with VMware. So we have heard the term software-defined data center. It was a term that was coined recently, and it really is a goal that has been for VMware a long time, even though it was, just a phrase that was coined recently. So let's talk just briefly for a history, or take a short history lesson on what VMware did. So the traditional IT was pure physical, all the standing boxes inside of a data center, and no virtualization. When virtualization was introduced, it means that VMware went through and packaged up each of those physical machines and turned them into virtual machines, and put many servers onto a single host. So that immediate result was massive TCO benefits. Each of those hosts were considerably less, a lot less power and cooling consumed, and so people saw immediate benefits. But it doesn't stop there. The software part of things really allows us to automate those IT tasks that people have. So we define policies in order to automate those tasks, and then we let the system do the job, do its work for us. Let IT support the customers, let IT support staff, and let the data center handle itself after given some guidance. The third piece of this is really taking these workloads and balancing them across multiple sites, but also off to the cloud. So utilizing private and public data centers to handle these workloads. So that's really VMware's goal, was to bring about the whole software-defined data center. So next slide, please. And that's where we come to optimizing our environments. Really, data centers operate off of 4 basic food groups. We have storage, we have compute, we have memory, we have networks. All of these things are consumed items by a virtual data center. So when we look at sizing virtual machines, how do you do it? When you first get a virtual machine, or when you are first required to put a virtual machine in place, how do you determine what its size is going to be? How do you determine how much memory or storage it's going to have? So sometimes we look on the side of the box and we go, okay, that's the physical requirements, but what does it look like in a virtual world? So take that information and then we put it out there, and we don't know whether it's doing its job or not. And so we track its overall performance to see exactly what resources it's consuming. And so we need tools to do that. And that's where these assessments come in. We can track utilization. We can see the highs and lows and verify exactly what needs to be used by that particular virtual machine. After we resize those virtual machines, we get a better understanding of how it will fit elsewhere. So how much is it going to cost to run this with the same resource footprint in the cloud, for instance? And we can also determine what app performance is and determine exactly how much, whether we need an all-flash arrangement or whether we need a hybrid solution, especially when we start looking at hyper-converged offerings like VMware vSAN. So next slide. Ultimately, the solution is to use these analysis tools to determine what the best resource footprint is. We have even gotten tools smart enough that now can do this themselves, but we still need to define those policies around it. So we determine what those policies are, and we put those in place. Now, this all boils down to making a well-groomed data center environment, which benefits everybody. But really, the relationship with Veeam goes along with this. Veeam has been an excellent partner of VMware from very early on, as was already stated. Veeam's updates have always been in lockstep with VMware's changes, so when there has been an overhaul of the API structure, they've been right there day one. So day one functionality was always there. And also, Veeam has always been virtual first. Support for physical servers has been introduced since then, but really virtual first is a cloud-oriented approach. We are looking towards no physical servers in environments anymore. something that can transmit to the cloud and stay up there without an issue. And you still need backup while you're in the cloud, just so you know. Also, Veeam's tools are extremely fast and have minimal impact on overall resources. So we get a lot done. Yeah, go on. We can go to slide 11. So the overall benefit really is we can automate that protection across all of the vSphere and virtual environments. We can utilize policy-based storage tools that VMware has put in place in conjunction with backups. And we can protect storage from storage that is provided by this emerging HCI market, and offer compatibility to VMware's own vSAN solution, our vSAN solution. Okay, what's next? So ultimately, the value to you, the end user, business continuity. You make sure that your business is back up and running quickly if there's ever an issue. You can verify those backups in a VM or of those VMs in a sandbox. Pop them open, take a look at them, make sure that they are viable. You can support any storage attached to the vCenter server as long as it's on the hardware compatibility list for VMware. And you get high-speed recovery from Veeam's own tools. It's very snappy, very quick, and also you don't have to rehydrate an entire virtual machine just to start it up and get it running. And lastly, data loss avoidance. Because we've optimized the environment and because of the rapid snapshots that VMware and Veeam's tools work together with, you get a very low potential for data loss. The more often the snapshots and the tighter in between, the less data has a chance to get lost.
Hey, George, this is Kevin Harlow here. I want to take a quick pause, and if we can go back just one slide. And just remind the folks on the WebEx that this is interactive. If you have any questions, the information is coming fast, and this is a great time to maybe step forward. You can use the chat tool to ask George. George will pop in, but value to the end users, that's really where we see your biggest bang for the buck on this WebEx and moving ahead. So I'll take a quick pause here and maybe see if anybody has any questions to maybe shoot a chat over to George, and he can ask on your behalf.
Oh, thank you, Kevin.
Okay. All right, folks, appreciate it. Eric, I'll hand it back over to you. Just wanted to take a quick break.
Yeah, sure thing. So really, in summary, we can use VMware's assessments to optimize your environment, and this helps you ultimately to get the most from your Veeam backup solution. And there's more that will be coming as we talk about this, and the assessments will be described later on. But yes, please put any questions in, and we will hit them at the end. Okay, over to you, Bill.
Okay, thank you very much, Eric. That was great. So up until this point, we've heard about the business relationship between Veeam and VMware. We've also heard from Eric about all the different benefits that can be derived. And a lot of times the assessments can be used such that you've got a challenge in your operations today. And by having someone like PCM come in as your trusted advisor and do these assessments, they can help you uncover better solutions to your existing challenges. So what we wanted to talk about was modernizing the data center. So this is the Veeam Availability Suite and VMware vSAN. So if you haven't taken a look at vSAN yet, I highly encourage you to do so. It allows you to do many, many things. So you can evolve, you can reduce CapEx and OpEx, stay ahead of the cost performance curve. It really increases flexibility. One of the nice things that I really like about vSAN is the ability to use storage policy-based management. So where you have your VMs deployed for optimal performance is kind of important. Do you want it to sit on all flash? Do you want it to sit on spinning disk? You have options with vSAN through these policies. The one thing we wanted to point out was that Veeam allows you to maintain that policy-based management not only at backup time, but at restore time. You also have the ability to change that at restore time if you wanted to do so. There's a lot of industry-leading features like VMware Instant Recovery, as well as the Veeam Explorers. If you're new to Veeam or you're an existing Veeam user and you haven't taken a look at the Explorers, they're really neat. When it comes to things like Exchange and SQL, for instance, it gives you the level of granularity that you really need to fine-tune your operations. Okay? The other thing is full support and commitment to the software-defined data center technologies that Eric gave us a breakdown of earlier. George, let's go to the next slide. Okay, so the next thing beyond vSAN is the evolution of the VMware cloud on AWS. What I really like about this solution, it allows you to extend your capabilities. Nobody here is suggesting move all your operations to the VMware cloud on AWS. What we're looking at is a number of strategic opportunities to expand your compute and storage capacity seasonally when you may need it, to create an on-demand DR center to increase availability. There's a lot of different things that you can do with VMware Cloud on AWS. And PCM is a great trusted advisor to help you come in and understand what those opportunities are, what opportunities for cost savings you'll have, and what something like this might cost you. So it's a great opportunity to bring PCM in to assist with this. Let's go to the next slide. There we go. So we wanted to backtrack just for a second and take a look at some of the technology in vSAN. So what this is, it's a core building block for the software-defined data center. So the storage policy-based management is a key part of this. vSAN comes in terms of ready nodes, and we're going to look at ready nodes on the next slide. But one thing we wanted to point out is you've got a big choice in configurations available from at least a dozen different ready node vendors. So you can have a combination of SSD and hard disk, or you can use SSD by itself. So let's go to the next slide. Okay, so we talked about the ready nodes, and what these are pre-configured nodes that are available from many different vendors. In this slide, we've decided to show you some of Veeam's key vSAN ready node partners, HP Enterprise, Cisco, and Dell. There's at least a dozen others, so you're not forced into a specific vendor lock-in. Okay, you've got a lot of choices here. And let's go to the next slide. And we wanted to point out some key features about vSAN. So obviously, very tight integration with vSphere. You get the VM-centric policy-based management. It's all available through a single UI. You don't have to go to 4 different places to manage and configure this or to get reports. It's flash optimized. When we say flash optimized, you get vSAN-specific features such as deduplication and optimized data movement. You get non-disruptive scale-up or scale-out expansion. The dedupe and compression that we mentioned. Advanced features like erasure coding. And there's also vSAN encryption. So if you think back to vSphere, there's VM-level encryption. With vSAN, you also get vSAN level encryption, which is essentially encryption of data at rest on a vSAN data store. So not only is this efficient and easy to manage and very powerful in terms of cost effectiveness, but it's also very secure. Let's go to the next slide. So how does Veeam integrate? What's Veeam's story around vSAN? So as Gina stated earlier, Veeam was a very, very early supporter and achieved certification with vSAN early on, and we continue that effort today. What we use are virtual proxies configured for appliance mode. So appliance mode is a Veeam term that essentially means the hot add transport mode for backup. Okay. What we recommend is that you deploy at least one proxy on each ESXi host within your vSAN cluster, right? We don't want to do hot add between one ESXi host where the VM lives and a different ESXi host where we do the backup, okay? You can use DRS VM host rules to keep the proxies resident on each ESXi host. Veeam reduces the network traffic by choosing the most appropriate proxy to back up a given VM. So we're not just picking, hey, use this proxy. We don't want to move data across ESXi hosts if we don't have to. Okay, so we implement what we call smart logic. So we enforce the backup of a given VM using a proxy that resides on the same host in the cluster. Okay. Let's go to the next slide. So the way we're doing this is at backup time, the storage policy assigned to a given VM is known by Veeam backup and replication. For instance, is this VM hosted on all flash? Is it hosted on spinning disk? We reassociate that policy at restore time. So we are policy aware for the whole vSAN storage policy-based management aspect of this solution. Okay. The other thing that we want to point out is that at restore time, if you want to choose a different storage policy-based management schema, you can. You're fully given that opportunity. Let's go to the next slide. The other thing we wanted to quickly point out is that there's a lot of integration between Veeam and the Microsoft System Center Operations Manager. So what we do is we give you 70 or more monitors to get real-time visualization into critical cluster states. So many of us are familiar with SCOM and are happy with using it. What we wanted to tell you was that the Veeam Management Pack provides you with that level of integration. So it's not just the vSAN specific operation dealing with vSphere and vSAN. It also ties into your favorite operations management systems as well. Let's go ahead to the next slide. And we wanted to branch into the whole VMware cloud scenario. So this is still relatively new to most of us, even though it's been out for almost a year now, or it's coming up on a year. So you may have seen some of the VMware cloud presentations that were given at VeeamON recently. If you haven't, our friends at PCM would be happy to tell you more about VMware Cloud on AWS. So it's an integrated cloud offering jointly developed by both AWS and VMware. It's delivered, sold, and supported globally by VMware and its partners. It allows organizations to extend or migrate their on-premises vSphere-based environments to the AWS cloud. It's delivered as an on-demand service, so you don't need to order hardware, rack it, stack it, power it, ping it. We'll show you in a moment how easy this is to set up. It's darn near instantaneous, so it gives us something we never had before. Let's go to the next slide. Okay. So from a technology perspective, it's the same technologies. vSphere, vSAN, NSX, and vCenter across on-prem and the cloud environment. Again, you don't have to purchase new hardware, rewrite apps, or modify your operating model. So everything you do today essentially extends to the VMware Cloud operational model. And again, it's automatic provisioning of infrastructure with full VM compatibility and workload portability between on-prem and the cloud. The other thing I wanted to point out was that VMware very professionally does all your upgrades for you in the VMware Cloud environment. So it's not exactly hands-off. You still do all the day-to-day operations. However, the bigger tasks in the background are handled by VMware. Let's go to the next slide. So how do you do this? This thing lives in the cloud. What does it look like? How do you access it? So essentially, you go to a URL and you log in. It's that simple. Let's go to the next slide. You'll get the welcome message, and the important thing here is that you can create a software-defined data center. So it's as easy as clicking a few buttons, and you're provisioning this VMware Cloud on AWS environment. This has really been done in a wonderful way by VMware and AWS. Let's click on the next, go to the next slide. And what we get here is a very easy to use dialog that says you've established the connection, and essentially what you'll do is you'll plug in your AWS account ID, and then you'll click next. So let's go to the next slide, George. And what we see here is the ability to select your AWS region. You get to define the name of your software-defined data center. You get to select the number of hosts. In this example, we're showing a single host in a cluster. This is only available for developers today. At present, VMware will let you have, I believe it is 4 to 32 hosts within your cluster, 4 being the minimum today. You'll have to ask VMware explicitly if they plan to reduce that to something like 2, and maybe that's a good question for the panelists if you're interested. You also get to define networks. And I apologize, I had a slight interruption there on my phone. So let's go ahead to the next slide, George. And what we wanted to do was make you aware of some of the networks that are available. So there's a couple of gateways that come with the product, right? So one of them is the management gateway, and one of them is the compute gateway. The compute gateway is where your production VMs are going to run. The management gateway is for your VPC connection or VPN connection back to your corporate data center. So there are 2 networks that come standard out of the box for you. Let's go to the next slide. And what we wanted to do here was try to sum up a few things. So it's the same Veeam product, whether you're on-prem or off-prem on VMC in the cloud. When we use Veeam in VMware Cloud, what we recommend is using a backup repository that is actually on AWS natively, right? So when we protect your data, we don't want the backup stored on the same production data store that we're using for VMware Cloud. We want to move it off into a different environment. So it's the same product, that you use it in the same exact way. You don't need to modify your operating model. So it makes things very easy if you're an existing Veeam user today. When you consider going to VMC, you don't have any operational changes. So let's go to the next slide, George. Okay, so what does this look like from a topology standpoint? Essentially, what we've got here on the left is a VMware Cloud on AWS environment. So it looks very similar to things you've seen before. What we do with Veeam is within VMs that live in the VMC environment, we actually send our proxy. When we use a proxy, we actually send that using the AWS Elastic Network Interface, ENI, which is very fast, over to an Amazon AWS Linux VM where we host the Veeam repository service. Okay, so what we're doing is we're getting those important backups and we're protecting that data outside of the VMware environment, very similar to what you may do today. Let's go to the next slide. Okay. So essentially what we need to do here is provide the necessary network connections to vCenter and other Veeam components. We need at least one Veeam proxy server to run on each node in the cluster for the hot add transport mode, very similar to vSAN. Okay. We also need that Veeam repository server to be placed outside the SDDC environment on an Amazon EC2 server, and we do recommend using a Linux server for that. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, so the network connections, they're not tricky, but we want to be very explicit in telling you what they look like. Okay, so we need a backup, we need a network connection to the vCenter server, and the vCenter server is on that management network. Okay, the proxy also requires a network connection to the vCenter server. So remember, these are on different gateways within the software-defined data center on VMware Cloud. Okay. The Veeam proxy also needs a network connection to the repository. So there's these three key network connections that get set up. Let's go to the next slide. So beyond what we're showing you here today, there's also an excellent VMware Veeam KB article, KB 2414, that defines all the steps to set these up. So we're just giving you an overview of this today. Again, we've got the management gateway and we've got the compute gateway depicted in this graphic. Okay, so Veeam gets deployed as a workload VM. It is one of your regular production VMware VMs in VMware Cloud. Let's go to the next slide. So what we need to do is we need to open up some firewall ports. And this is very easy to do through the UI provided by VMware. And we basically punch a few holes in this so that the Veeam backup and recovery server can talk to vCenter, the proxies can talk to vCenter, and the proxies can also communicate with the EC2 backup repository. Let's go to the next slide. Okay. So this is an example of the way you configure these firewall rules. So again, VMware's done a real nice job to allow you to set this up very easily. So here we're opening up a vCenter Veeam rule so the Veeam backup server can communicate with vCenter, right? So we see destinations and sources on all these. Here we see the compute gateway public IP can communicate with vCenter. So let's go ahead to the next slide. Okay. What we wanted to talk about next was opening up the correct network connection to use the fast ENI connection, the Elastic Network Interface connection between a Veeam proxy and the Veeam repository that resides on EC2. So let's go to the next slide. And here we can see we're opening up those ports in the firewall. Then we go to Amazon and we open up the same ports. So this requires the use of two different user interfaces, but again, it's been made very easy to accomplish by VMware and Amazon. Okay, so very simple firewall firewall rules are used to facilitate these communications. Let's go to the next slide. Now, one of the things that we always prescribe and recommend at Veeam is something we call the 3-2-1 rule, right? 3 copies of every backup, 2 different media types, and 1 copy off-site. So here we're looking at an example where we use the same SCSI hot add technology for a proxy located on the same ESXi host as the guest. The backup gets routed through the firewall over ENI to an Amazon EC2 Linux repository. Now, what you've got at this point is the capability to execute backup copy jobs through the AWS backbone to a different Amazon region. Okay, and there's a lot of options here, and we're just trying to give you an idea of what you can accomplish. So here we're going to a different Amazon region to create a backup copy. If we go to the next slide, what we can see here is that you can also back up directly to an on-prem repository. You could also replicate VMs to an on-prem environment. So you've got a lot of options here. And I would recommend you engage PCM to figure out what the best solution is for your particular business needs and requirements. Okay? There are a lot of options here. It's a very flexible solution. Let's go to the next slide. Okay. So we just gave you a quick overview of some of these technologies today, right? PCM is your trusted advisor. They can help you dig deeper into vSAN. They can help you dig deeper into the VMware cloud. This KB2414 that I mentioned earlier is something I highly recommend. It tells you how to punch through these firewall ports, set up these firewall rules. Okay. There's also a really nice site here, the VMware Cloud on AWS site, cloud.vmware.com. Highly recommend you visit these. They're very engaging, and it gives you some basic pricing and other really important information. Let's go to the next slide, George.
Hey, Bill, if I could add something?
Sure.
So when you stay within the AWS ecosystem, in fact, we could go back to slide 40, so 2 more. When we stay inside of the AWS ecosystem, we don't incur any sort of egress charges.
That's right.
Yeah, so everything's on the same network. Everything is kind of cohesive inside of the AWS infrastructure, and therefore you don't pay anything for moving things around within the different AWS services.
Right.
Now,
and yeah, go ahead. So cost is a big question that we see frequently. We see these at Veeam Live. We see them on a variety of different media types, right? So email questions, what does this cost? It looks great on PowerPoint. Operationally, you can do a POC with VMware. The whole cost equation, especially tied to ingress and egress, becomes another piece of the puzzle. So if you were fortunate enough to be at Veeam On and you saw the hybrid cloud presentation that Ahmad gave with Anthony Spiteri, there are various costs that can be incurred. What we encourage you to do is speak with PCM, and they'll help you get more specific cost guidance, right? There's really great flexibility in the solution, but you also want to optimize your spend. So again, PCM and VMware and Veeam can help you with all those cost parameters to get the best cost optimized solution. Does that kind of answer the question, Eric?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I would also add, even if you're going from VMC on AWS to an on-prem solution, the Veeam tools are extremely good at backing up only what is necessary and also compressing that information, so that reduces egress fees as well. So that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, that's important too, because you know, it's kind of like you're at a restaurant and you're looking at a menu, but you don't see any prices. We all want to know what those prices are. We want to know what the immediate cost is, what the near-term cost is, and what the longer-term cost is, so that we can budget and adjust the solution accordingly.
Excellent. Let's move on.
Thank you very much, Bill, and over to Gina and Eric for their respective summaries.
Great, thank you. So thanks, Bill, for the overview on vSAN and VMC on AWS, integrations that we have with modernizing the data center and integrated public cloud. Now we wanted to really focus on our integrations that we have beyond VMware, looking at Dell EMC. So we've had some significant integrations for several years now with Data Domain, and have developed a storage snapshot integration with the rest of the Dell EMC family that's available here. We also are really focused on providing these integrations and building out our VMware ecosystem. And so, with that, we're continuing to develop and looking to provide the overall value that we're providing for customers, and reducing costs and providing simplicity in their IT environment. So I'll turn this over to Eric.
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much, Gina. So on to the next slide. What I would suggest, and this is just the quick hit list at the very end here, last action items, look to your PCM reps to do a vSphere optimization assessment. The idea that we can take each, review all the workloads in your environment and help you size them appropriately so they're optimized for maintaining backups and just maintaining overall health. This particular, the VOA, as we call it, the vSphere Optimization Assessment, it helps you understand what those oversized and undersized machines are. Anything that's stressed in the environment will show up. It helps with understanding what the trends for your utilization is. It helps with corrective actions and lets you decide whether to take those actions or not, and it'll learn from those decisions. And it also lets you review changes that have happened. So if something changed in the environment, you are able to review that and troubleshoot it easier. Plus, it supports management plugins that hook into different applications or hardware vendors. So if you have MS SQL in the environment, you can create a hook that will look and observe at that environment or that application and get information from it, and then put it into the reporting dashboards. Okay, next slide. Along those same lines, vSAN assessment, after we've done our optimization, we can look at each of the workloads and what Bill was talking about, whether we want an all-flash array or if we want a hybrid array, one that uses both flash cache as well as spinning disk, and really the cost benefits that go along with that. You can determine which applications are best suited for which type of deployment, and then we can also understand what the raw capacity or the utilization is, as well as kind of give you a rough estimate of what the cost would be to move to a vSAN type of environment. Next slide. And last, hybrid cloud. Now this is the one that really ties into what we were already talking about with VMC on AWS. After we've optimized the environment, after we have fine-tuned all the different virtual machines to make sure that they are using the correct footprint, we can determine what the cost on-prem is, but we can also then start comparing that resource footprint to what it looks like in the cloud, and then determine what the cloud cost would be associated with that. And again, it's all based on the 4 major food groups: compute, RAM, storage, and networking. So you get a good holistic understanding of what your consumption is, but then how that consumption would look in a cloud environment. Plus, you can also break this out into different organizations and look at chargeback and showback. So you could actually provide an invoice to different business units that are using the IT environment. And of course, trending growth data, understanding exactly where your environment's heading. That's pretty much it for me. If you do want to engage any one of us or engage the PCM crew, let us know. We'll be involved. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you very much. We do have some time remaining for questions. Again, if you have questions that you have not yet shared, please go ahead and enter them in the question box now. We don't really have any questions at the moment, but if anybody would like to finalize their summaries or give any more statements. All right, so with that, many thanks to our speakers, Gina, Bill, and Eric, and thank you all for joining us today. Be sure to check out www.pcm.com/webinars for our on-demand recordings and for our upcoming webinar schedule. Thanks again for joining us, and we hope to see you again for future webinars. Have a great day.